Hello, friends. Today we're going to be talking about Season 8 of herosiege. A very fun season I enjoyed quite a bit, dropping over 190 hours into it, and I do plan to return even before Season 9 to try out a few more things I wanted to test and play around with and have some fun with, maybe even some fun community events. I did play the entirety of the season in my Blood Pact, dubbed the Paw Pact, and enjoyed it with up to 200 people having a great time. But I wanted to dig into the details of some of the mechanics and some of the changes of the season, giving feedback on what I did and didn't like, and going over what I want to see in the future. Let's go ahead and jump right in with difficulty and hell scaling, the changes we had for Hell and Inferno. I'll start off with that, as it was one of the biggest changes and one that was most contentious walking into the season. I saw a lot of feedback from people saying it was going to destroy the game or make it impossible. I had a different opinion, and I want to talk on that. I do have to say I'm actually satisfied with the Hell changes. Hell definitely feels like the namesake and puts to test your character and your current gear and level. It definitely pushes you to grind to level 100 in the earlier areas of Hell, or maybe even Nightmare if your character's not up to snuff. And it does make you reevaluate your choices when it comes to abilities, gearing, defense, damage, all those things. It's a wall. It's the first one you're really going to encounter given the strength of some classes and their augments, as most of Normal and Nightmare is kind of a joke. Or can be depending on your skill level or character choice. I will say something I noticed in Hell is this game still really lacks a lot of ways to get yourself defenses and make yourself tanky, at least easily so, or that is easily accessible or pointed out to a new player. I'm a fan overall though of the changes for Hell. While I know for some classes it's more of a struggle than others, it doesn't feel like an impassable challenge or completely broken. One suggestion I do have is maybe lowering campaign boss HP in Hell 1. One of the main issues characters have in herosiege is lack of gear, as everyone is very gear reliant. And getting gear often requires satanic zones to make it easy to target them, or even getting to those zones to target farm them, as you're definitely not doing that in Nightmare. Many classes are able to clear mobs and farm quickly, but bosses will push them into the ground. I think allowing people slightly easier access to satanic zones might be a step in the right direction. Now that Hell has become where the real endgame starts, though with power scaling possibly changing next season, that might not be as necessary to do. It is something I think leads to newer or less experienced players who are being told to target farm your gear being given some grace to get to that point. Reducing boss HP allows the jump in Hell difficulty to be not as bad because it's no laughing matter, and if you're already struggling on bosses to even get there, then you're gonna have a really bad time. Overall, the Hell changes are really good. I like them a lot. However, let's talk about Inferno. Well, Inferno feels like the wall I talked about, one that most classes just can't climb. I like the concept, and in theory it was great when they talked about it. And hey, I get it, it's the hardest content in the game, so it definitely needs to be a challenge. My question is, where do we draw the line between challenge and overwhelming difficulty that forces the player to rethink if they made the right class choice? That's where you get into a sticky territory, unfortunately, especially with a game like herosiege that has so many classes. Inferno being a big challenge and jump over Hell 5 is fine, and it definitely is. The issue is that it's just a tiny bit too much on the scaling, and the new monster modifiers like shielding and divine, etc. make the game just insurmountably challenging. I don't say this lightly, and while I played in a Blood Pact without access to trade, I was fortunate to play one of the more balanced classes, which is Demon Spawn. However, I have to ask myself, is it balanced or is it overtuned? I've always thought Demon Spawn is one of the best casters in the game as far as balance, maybe with a little less of their single target damage. But they are the pinnacle of how I think casters scaling should feel. The problem is most classes didn't feel like this. I saw many people having problems and being given gear from Inferno and still having issues with clear. These are people using the most optimized versions of the build on these classes and still having plenty of problems even getting through the basic mobs or farming satanic zones, which was the real problem. It is a problem of core game design when a character and gear from that difficulty has issue clearing that difficulty. And I don't mean just that they can't kill mobs, but more that killing the mobs is slow or tedious, and in some cases, like Stormweavers, can actually crash your game from ping timeouts because there's too much on the screen because things are alive too long. I know there's plenty of people out there who are going to go, Inferno's fine, I made it there with X or yada yada, I don't care. I just don't care. I'm speaking from the place of wanting to see people not have to wear Lucifer's Crown or reroll to Drone Marksman, Marauder, Demon Spawn, or whatever's really strong just to enjoy the endgame content at the same level of other people. FOMO shouldn't make people re-roll to one of 3 or 5 classes. That's a bad concept and it caused a lot of disappointment. I was hoping the season would be more class balanced on who could get to endgame. My suggestion, especially if we're going to do some kind of changes around Inferno prior to the incarnation tree, cut the HP values down by maybe 20%, Let people ease into it better. I think this is easier than trying to balance all the classes that struggle. And yes, I know that the Incarnation Tree will probably solve this, but that's something we'll talk about later, and it's not Season 9 yet. I'm also going to disregard the term aspirational content, as I find this more of an excuse than a real term. Aspirational and feels like shit on 60% of classes are two very different things. Also, the first time I heard this term was from Diablo 4 devs, and I don't really think you want to be copying their terminology when doing game design. Overall though, scaling was good. Just Inferno feels like it's something that needs another pass, or the next season, we'll see. I just want to see more people able to play the characters they like without needing a Lucifer's crown and a million flow runes. Let's talk about Inferno campaign bosses. On the subject of those, I actually thought they were pretty fine, with the exception of Gurag. Gurag sucks. Gurag sucks massive ass. I do not like having my character disabled by effects. This isn't a World of Warcraft PvP arena, so please don't crowd control me. I understand that's part of the challenge of the fight, but there's a fine line between challenge and extreme frustration and irritation. The fight actually isn't that challenging outside of that, so I get why it's there, but please, dear God, it's so annoying. The bosses themselves, I think, are good. I think the main thing that makes them tolerable with all their new mechanics and screen-wide attacks is that their damage isn't obscene. You can tank most of their abilities with good resistance and not die unless you get over and over and over, or you stand in the Carp King puddle and melt like the Wicked Witch. If they did more damage, then some of these fights would actually be miserable and really irritating to ever engage with, which I think isn't the right direction or choice since so many people need to farm them endlessly for rings or soul gems. As apparently soul gems are now Inferno only, rip 30 hours of Craxy's life. The bosses felt good though. I liked most of them, and I think they were well tuned in the sense that they aren't so overwhelmingly punishing. The punishing part of Inferno is just all the other monsters. On the topic of scaling, multiplayer scaling changes, that's pretty interesting. This is a change I'm not a fan of, and like many others, I understand it but hate it. Multiplayer in herosiege has always been one of the best aspects. It's genuinely tops a lot of other RPGs in this field. The big factor being that it's pretty seamless. Allowing drop-in, drop-out gameplay, jumping into friends' lobbies for a quick Shadow Realm or dungeon, and loot being personal on top of that, so there's no mad dash Diablo 2 style to snag uniques and eventually get mad at each other. This kind of gameplay is sorely missed from the Diablo 2 gameplay style and is really fun to have. The problem with increasing the scaling of this is it makes earlier aspects of party play really miserable. I'm sure more experienced players don't have many issues, but for a lot of us, this wasn't very fun. It creates a realm where not only is the requirement to play together and blast, especially once you get to Hell, being much higher, but once you get to Inferno, that scaling, well, you're getting into the realm of massive performance issues. This is even the case in Hell difficulties though. Scaling multiplayer HP values up causes the game to lag when classes with high projectile count abilities are together. Regardless of where they are in the zone, this is a huge performance issue that hinders gameplay, causes crashes, and feels really awful. Now, while I say I dislike this, I understand the sentiment behind it. Group play in herosiege is super fun. It always has been. However, it is by far the most advantageous aspect of the game, especially economically. Being able to get drops per person as well as utilize gear funneling and or targeting codexes in high value zones together for quicker speed is an extreme advantage. The majority of top players in the economy are not playing solo. They are rotating games, calling out Shadow Realms battlefields, pulling resources, and piggyback jumping through zones with a teleporter or dasher to get through things faster. And they're also pooling together for codexes to print loot. Group play is massively advantageous in an economic and race manner. This is most likely the reason for this change, as I know lots of solo players are probably bitter and irritated by this, which I totally understand. I personally don't always want to be forced into group play myself for the biggest advantage, and I primarily like to play with other people, so I'm saying that understanding that I'm not the target audience of restricting group play. I like playing with others, but it shouldn't be the best option all the time, 100% of the time, that I need to do. But I will say this. While I understand the sentiment and I understand the reasons, I think you should be incentivized to play with other people. Creating a healthy multiplayer environment is good for games and allows people to socialize better and form new friendships or relationships. It also makes games spread via word of mouth as people want to have their friends come play with them. This is a complex issue, and I agree and understand with both sides. I'm just not sure how to tone down the economic advantage of it, and I'm pretty sure even this change didn't really solve that, as experienced people just outgear it or already knew how to handle it. So let's move on to boss changes. We'll talk about drops and we'll talk about Inferno materials. Inferno boss materials, well, I like this in theory, but some of the actual practice didn't land. First off, I have too many goddamn items in my materials tab. I'll talk about this later, but cards need their own tab. Mixing in cards and the new star level material and the Inferno boss material was too much. One main issue I see with Inferno materials really only pops up on Amun-Ra. Farming Amun-Ra scrolls is actually so miserable it may be the worst part of the game for me. Then when you realize you may need to drop down from Inferno to Hell to do this to get the quest complete, it becomes even worse. Most players are going to be backtracking to go do Amon-Ra and Gabriel in a lot of situations, as a majority of people I know did, as they like to overgear those fights because the extreme requirements make them irritating. Amon-Ra especially being a fight that always seems a little funky, so people want to outgear it so they have no worry of bricking it. My suggestion is we make the Amon-Ra and Gabriel quest completable in Inferno, as well as Hell, the same way you did with the Soulforge Ring quest. This way, if you're blasting super hard, you aren't forced to backtrack to a lower difficulty and get different materials and items. Otherwise, I think Inferno boss mats are a good change, good for the economy and overall health of the game. Boss drops, however, this is a lot to chew on. First off, let me say once again, understandable change. Day 2 to 3 of the market being 5,000 Reaper weapons and 1,000 Sungli rings and flasks was really annoying, and it devalues the items. However, adding 4 items to Reaper's drop pool and nerfing the drop chance of any of them to 26% just on Hell 5 was actually something that caused so much frustration I'm surprised some people played as long as they did. The issue with changing boss drops is the steep requirements to get to them and the lack of safety nets this causes. From the economy perspective, this does add value to not only the items but the materials to fight the bosses, but it feels bad. That's what I want to focus on here. This feels really bad. It is actually heartbreaking to kill some of these bosses, especially early on, after hard-pressed earning of their materials and a struggle if your gear is in a poor state to get nothing. The magic find buff on them is nice, but you aren't farming bosses to randomly luck into a heroic or angelic, you're killing them for their items. I say this as someone who got a Tayrels from their first Gabriel. I still don't really think that the solution is just giving them more magic find. This one is hard to solve, because I feel like adding value to these items and chase to them is good, but the feeling for players has been unanimously awful from what I've seen. Bosses not dropping loot makes people very likely to crash out or not want to engage with the mechanic, especially in blood packs. And I've heard this complaint from people in SSF who have put hundreds of hours under their belt as well. This is me even more concerned because I've seen in Season 9 we'll be using crafted keys to access bosses, which means you can't make the bosses cheaper to access in blood packs, where you also don't get the SSF drop boost, but I'll touch on that later in the blood pack section. Overall, this is another difficult choice to make. You have to ask yourself if adding economic value to these items and bosses is worth the overwhelming frustration it brings to the wider player base, especially the ones with less playtime that tackle bosses more sparsely. Newer players or players who have less playtime are going to feel this the most, the worst, and are likely to never touch the game again if bosses just aren't dropping anything for them after the long grind to unlock them. Also, why the hell is Luna included in this? In trade, you can literally buy the materials to fight all the other bosses. You can fight every other boss by buying the materials and walking in. Luna, you cannot. She is the one you literally cannot buy into. You have to work towards her. Why is her drop rate nerfed? On that note, Amon-Ra too, because scrolls suck and that fight sucks. I don't think their drop rate should be so low, especially Luna. Bump her drop rate up 3 times what it is, or just give it 100%. One suggestion I can probably make to this is changing the weighting around on the items based on what's most valuable, but that's still a sticky situation. I think there's a solution here, I'm just not sure of it, and maybe the incarnation tree will help. Let's talk about a big factor, which was chase zone changes. Chase zone changes are awesome. I like the shuffle up, and I think maybe it's a good idea to keep the game healthy and fresh to shuffle these things around every few seasons or so. Just to have fun time with targeting new zones for items. Overall, I love this change. It'd be really cool every few seasons to have to go to a different zone for my items. You know, kind of change up the scenery, not make it so formulaic, keep people guessing and thinking. This is really good, until you get to unstable rifts. The fact that Sight of the Gods and Celestial's Authority are locked behind unstable rifts is a decision that baffles and enrages me to no end. Unstable rifts are not only buggy, causing me to either crash or disconnect from all chat features 1 out of every 3 to 5 I enter, but they are sparse, don't have a large map reveal radius on the minimap, meaning it's hard to see them sometimes. You know, like the way Shadow Realms and Battlefields are pretty easy to see. And they do not always take you to a rift zone. They are by design a terrible target farm because they are not targetable. And please do not talk to me about how you can make the Rift Codex, because orbs were bugged for the first 2 days. Getting codexes with that many sockets is hard, and those zones only last 20 minutes. On top of this, you remove the Rift Glyph from the game, meaning I get to chain reset zones for hours looking for tiny pink portals that might not even take me where I want to go or might crash me. Unless I can somehow get myself the Codex, which can for a lot of players be locked behind Inferno because of the sparsity of sockets. Now let me layer on top of that the fact that I'm 90% convinced unstable rift target farming for these 2 items is bugged. As on a Blood Pact I did over 200 unstable rifts, many of them in satanic zones with increased drop and heroic drop with 2,000 magic find, and never saw a single one of these items drop. RNG's RNG, right? Yeah, except I had about 30 other people in the same situation and they had the same experience. We actually had more angelics 3 days in than we had Sight of the Gods or Celestial's Authorities combined. I won't tinfoil hat it too much or lean on the fact that one of the people in my chat actually did extensive MF testing in stable rifts and did find that there's something really wrong with them. I'll just say that putting two of the most valuable items in the game for casters, one being particularly required because not having teleport sucks, in a zone that is probably what I'd call the least targetable of them all really sucks. I don't even know if I can call this a target zone because it's hard to target. At least with the other zones, you can just find a way to get in or buy your way in. I think all of the target farming changes, this is the one that was my least favorite, and I legitimately saw people hang up their hat and actually stop playing the game after days of trying to get a sight of the gods. That's really depressing because I think they would have kept playing and having a lot of fun for several more days, if not longer term, if the item that they needed wasn't so hard locked behind crazy infrequent drops. And I am saying this from the perspective of a blood pact with boosted drops. On trade, at least you can buy it, but from last I heard, they were pretty rare on trade too. Hopefully in the future this is addressed and maybe changed because I really didn't like this. When it comes to items and class balance, that was another interesting shakeup for the entire season. Item changes are something I looked forward to the most in this patch, and I absolutely adored them. Some much needed love was granted to some items and others got sweeping changes, as well as several new items opening up completely new options or builds. Things like overloaded dice were huge. They shocked me with probably one of the most powerful items in the game I've seen. They're really enjoyable as a chase item or reroll option for many people. Items overall feel really good. I'm still a bit confused about ailment damage and if we'll see elements become something to seek or target as a damage type ever, especially with the new tree and some of what I've seen. It does really feel like the design of the game is too fast and monsters are too quick and kill you too fast for ailments to be a play, but I'm open-minded going into Season 9 and maybe that's some of the answer we'll have for Inferno health scaling. Lucifer Crown deserves a special mention here as an item I expect to see heavily nerfed. If not, it will remain the undisputed most powerful item I know of. The cool thing is that you can make pretty much anything work with this item and it allows otherwise underrepresented or underused builds or classes to do things they normally couldn't. The uncool thing is that it also amplifies already strong classes into obscene levels of damage. It is a clever and cool item though, just a bit too powerful. While items are good, I did have the expectation that this would lead to some classes that have been historically a bit weaker to rise up and be able to tackle content of a higher level. I had the mistaken idea that it would enable Inferno to be viable for everyone with enough items. While this may be the case if you can get a Lucifer Crown, it's not so much the case for most normal players. Is this an item problem or a class problem? Maybe a bit of both. Items offer power, but if you give them too much power, the classes that are already strong skyrocket and the classes that are weak jump a few feet. The reality is classes still need some meat to their core aspects tuned up and to really reach the levels of others. I mentioned Demon Spawn earlier, and I feel that casters should have similar scaling to this class to make them feel more in line. Obviously you want some swing to when and where the power spikes come in across the classes so they're not all the same, but some just never get theirs. I think Demon Spawn is kind of the pinnacle of how that should feel because it's one of the classes that can really push through the content and feels good as you get every single piece of gear. I was hoping to say the class balance this season got better, but it actually got worse, and this is entirely due to the way Inferno Scaling works. And it's less about the classes. I do think classes and balance are getting better, and I can't offer enough praise for the new itemization we're seeing. Hopefully in the future we can see more data-based heavy testing of classes to work out the kinks. And while I know there's a lot of classes, I'm sure there's not a lack of dedicated players to give feedback. Constructive feedback, that is. Let's go over the season mechanics of the season. This is kind of the highlight where you get new mechanics every season. It's kind of standard to RPGs, and let's talk about the ones we got in Season 8. Unholy Siege. This is what I'd consider the good. Unholy Siege is awesome. I like it. Between this and Season 7, Chaos Pillars, you have no reason to really just sit in 3-3. Outdoor zones actually have incentive. I'm no longer going to be a cave goblin loot gremlin cat sitting in 3-3 for the entirety of my playtime. Unholy Siege has good variance, enough possible mega spawns to keep it interesting, and also engages with the second season mechanic by being the primary engine to drop it early on pre-codex. I enjoyed this mechanic thoroughly, especially after Shadow Skull damage was toned down to be reasonable. I hope it stays in the future and it makes outdoor zones way more lucrative and fun. The feeling you get when you get like the A-bomb spawn or the chest mimic spawns is great. It's a huge dopamine hit and there's always an edge of your seat moment waiting to see if it drops something cool. Terra cards I would consider more the bad. They're okay. They are fine to use, but the sheer grind it takes to actually get a craft going is somewhat miserable. Maybe they're balanced around trade and everything I'm about to say from a blood pact perspective is wrong. And I understand they are essentially a path towards Angelics and Unholies, but that's 500 of 3 cards to get maybe 1 out of 5 cards needed for an Angelic or Unholy. And you might not get the 2 Unholy cards or 2 Angelic cards in a row, even if you could craft 2, which I think got disabled due to some bugs. My biggest use for these cards was crafting the 10 random materials, and that was pretty fun, especially if it hit the star level materials. Other than that, I feel like I rarely engaged with the mechanic until I could do Terra card deck codexes, and even then it felt like it was minimal. Maybe that's by design, but it definitely feels steep and like something most players won't see any use or payoff for in the short term. My suggestion is to get a few more interesting crafts available. Make them drop more often, and please give us an inventory tab for them. Them filling up the material tab is actually painful. Also, the art on them is gorgeous, by the way, and I love the way they look. Essence vaults are what I would consider the ugly. Essence vaults are where I don't know what to say. I don't say this lightly, but Essence vaults may be the worst mechanic I've seen implementation-wise in many years. And definitely it's one of the worst in herosiege. I think the concept of Essence vaults is awesome. The way they sounded to me was like a fun passive farm, maybe with a tiny bit of targeting to unlock some cool loot, something that you just threw in your inventory in a slot. Nothing crazy, but you got to kill stuff, and as you killed stuff, the little meter filled up, and eventually, hey, some items. That's not what they were. Not only were these items bugged and pretty much nearly never dropped from the majority of players, they also didn't show up on your minimap, so when they did drop, this means most people never even saw them. This was a bug that didn't get resolved for a long time, and so long that the major season mechanic of these Essence Vaults was basically just forgotten and ignored by most people. In trade, maybe it was a little more active, but in blood packs and SSF, no one cares. Now let's assume you got one. Some of the requirements are just ludicrous. Yes, I've been told by some players that you can totally get Angelics and it's super OP. Who cares? It's miserable and daunting to look at and deal with. I saw one that wanted someone to kill 9 Amun-Ra's. Do you know how horrible that is? Do you know how long that takes? And that wasn't the only thing. There's still 130k mobs on there. Maybe they were designed around trade, but if the Amun-Ra's were all you had to kill, that might be fine. Let's touch on the single biggest issue, the insane mob count needed and the mob typing. Here's the main issue. Mob types are a bad system for something like this. Mob-specific targeting is not good, because having to go through third-party sources to figure out where these monsters are shouldn't be the case. And even if you were to add in-game where these are, you still have to find 10 to 50 of them per zone, and most of these require you to kill 80 to 140,000 of these monsters, meaning this could take anywhere from 8 to 14 hours for most players, even with fast builds, just for one of these. It is not a passive farm if you have to target a single type of monster. When I saw that it wanted me to kill 137,000 books in Subconscious Mind, I dropped it on the ground and never thought about it again. Now, instead of ranting about how awful this all is, let me just simply put forth a solution. Make the monster kill count based on the zone and not on the monster type. Even better, make it the entire act and leave the number as high as it is instead of tuning it down. If it's just the zone, this became more of a passive farm, especially because people can target farm heroics while chipping away at a vault. If it's based on an act, it's even better and people can diversify more and have more fun. These showing on the map, dropping more often, having slightly less tedious mob count, and letting you farm zones or acts themselves would vastly improve this system. I'm sure this is just something that got missed in the sea of changes, but it was very frustrating to see as a main season mechanic. Also, yes, I know you can trade them and like 9 different people could do the Amun-Ra, but like, come on, let's be realistic here with our mechanics. We want them to be fun and something for people to actually care about. Codexes. I like the Codex changes. I'm not going to lie. Codex has got quite an overhaul. We won't talk in detail about how orbs were being filtered out for the first few days, which sucked. Codexes themselves, however, well, I actually like the new system. I really enjoy the Inferno version, though I feel it's a shame it's locked behind Inferno, so a lot of players won't see it, especially given the current scaling, as it's one of the more fun mechanics to engage with in endgame. It further creates a huge economic gap, though, between people playing purely meta blasters and people wanting to just play their favorite class, and with the Inferno gap being a thing, well, that can be a big problem. Inferno Codexes in the essence of chaos, allowing them to have cool modifiers, actually is really engaging late game. I can see it in trade being a huge market commodity. If I'm worried about one thing though, it's the monster pack spawn as Chaos Pillars Codex being basically as strong as Goblin Codex was. While it is harder to come by due to the factor of the orbs needed and the Codex having enough sockets and needing that specific enchant, it still is a bit powerful. And I think there's some tech that might have been slept on. Moving on to my favorite subject, Blood Pact Changes. This is where the cat actually spent his time this season. We started with a Blood Pact and it was a lot of fun. I have plenty of feedback, but let me say Blood Pact chat was awesome. It was great actually being able to talk to people and see item drops and rolls and just have banter and fun. Hopefully the connectivity issues with it get worked on in the future, but it was a huge change and I loved it. Being able to admin people and actually remove people from the pact was also a big win. This took the pressure off of just one person and allowed better administrative control, which was really nice. Blood Pact stash changes didn't make it in, unfortunately, but that's for understandable reasons, as the stash system itself is too prone to exploits. I'll also note here that even if Blood Pact stash was accessible by everyone, in a larger pact, the stash is simply too small. I think some ideas just to spitball with the stash changes for Blood Pacts is maybe make an admin-only stash that only people with the admin rank can access. This allows for easier distribution and storage of high-value items, or even make tabs on the Blood Pact stash itself have this functionality to best be set by the Pact owner, who can change all of these at will. Even though if you did change that, the stash just isn't big enough and may need a second one or dozens of tabs to store how many items some people get. Especially in a 200-person pact like we had, it was basically always in use or always full, and we resorted to using BP chat and a separate Discord to trade items. This isn't ideal, but worked better than trying to drop into a stash and hope you get in. Like I said before, third-party resolutions to these problems aren't what you want in your game, but I understand that sometimes they have to be taken. I'm also not sure if mass inviting players made it in, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. Features I'd like to see for Blood Pacts down the line: some stash features like admin locking, bigger size, additional stash size, or stashes with different purposes. Multiple stashes is always an option. Or the pipe dream of a multiple player active stash without issues, and it being bigger. When it comes to sliders, I'd like to see some options on those as well added. With the boss drop changes, I think increasing boss drop chance is a bit warranted. Even with boosted rates, boss drops still retain their trade values and feel pretty rough in a smaller environment. And if we are moving to a crafted key system where we'll no longer be able to tone down the needed entry fee, which was a huge band-aid to the bad drop rates, we will 100% need this slider. So sliders for more boss drop rate, probably sliders for more drop materials from the bosses like the battlefield fragments and dimensional shards, since we're going to need to make keys out of them. And please give us the ability to boost the scroll of raw drop rate by like 1,000%. Farming those sucks so bad. You get a max of like 3, and it's awful. They're easy in trade because nobody wants to do the fight outside of their quests, and you can purchase them, but dear God, in a Blood Pact, they are awful. Honestly, I'd buff these in SSF too, because SSF players are going to crash the hell out over this over time. Overall, Blood Pact's got a big improvement, and I'd love to do more Blood Pacts in the future. Group self-found is a way a lot of people like to play, and I'm always supportive of this with the current system. Also, side note for the far future, if you can make a market server rentable to go along with Blood Pacts, maybe this is an option to allow item distribution with 0 cost for 0 posting and 0 buyout. It's just a cracked idea I had that could make the company more money, and I'm sure some people with money would be willing to do. I know my community would probably fund it depending on the cost. But that's, like I said, kind of a cracked idea. Titles were added, and they're awesome. I love the new titles. I want to see more of these, as well as more ways to get cosmetics and things like this in the game, outside of just wormholes. Maybe seasonal cosmetics tied to certain bosses or challenges, the way Path of Exile does it. It's a great added feature, though. I just wish it would stop randomly turning off. There were new quests added, and I like the new quest system. They help players that just hit endgame get guided to what they need to do, and I think better guidance like this is sorely needed in a lot of places in the game. And even tidying this up a bit to give better explanation on what difficulty is needed to be completed and what things actually unlock other quests would help. One of the biggest questions I got is how to even unlock the M and Ron Gabriel quest. Next up, let's talk about the star system. I had mixed feelings about the star system. I wasn't sure I liked it based on the description, and I think there's going to be a big difference in someone playing a Blood Pact or Trade or SSF when it comes to their opinion on the star system. From a Blood Pact perspective, I wasn't a huge fan of how swingy it was. I think the bricking an item, taking away all the star level was really, really painful. And in a Blood Pact environment where these resources are scarce and have no economic value, even pooling them, you could still just completely brick items and never get a 4 or 5 star. I think at the end of the day, maybe there's some ways to solve this. Maybe bricking the item with a star level item doesn't take away all the stars, maybe just takes like 1 or 2. I know that makes it easier to get 5-star an item, but let's be real, it would also just add more value to the star level things economically. I think it's a great system as it is. It just needs some tuning to not feel as bad, because once again, I'm going to touch on, you want mechanics to feel good most of the time. And yes, there's a huge dopamine hit when you 5-star something, but the in-between of that is not there for a lot of people. Maybe on trade it's different, but you have to keep in mind there's still other game modes. When talking about things like that though, I do want to just bring up one other item, and that's mirrors. Mirrors are awesome. This is a great feature. I love mirrors. They kick ass, especially in Blood Pacts. Mirrors are super cool. One final note I'd like to say, and that is skins. I loved the skins this season. They are beautifully done, great art, cool effects, and actually made me play Demon Spawn, immediately making my class decision for me, which is a decision I won't regret because it's my favorite class. I'm just going to say one thing to pass here. Add more gender-bent skins like the Samurai. Seriously, you will make so much money. I bought the skin and I don't even play the class. Just do it. Trust me. Also a big fan of all the new MTX like death effects. Really hoping in the future as well we can combine skins and the skin effects together to change ability appearances regardless of what skin we're wearing. So overall, when we talk about Season 8, how did I like it? How did I feel about it? I think Season 8 was awesome. I actually really enjoyed it. It's easily some of the most fun I had in a while in herosiege, and I played it longer than I did the previous 2 seasons, and I will most likely go back to it to play more before Season 9. Despite some of the flaws, the game's going in the right direction. The difficulty changes in scaling, the item overhauls, and changes we see surrounding that, and the mechanics offering more engagement and crafting are all things the game needs for the future. My feeling about Season 8 is that it's one part of a puzzle piece, and I think the Incarnation tree in Season 9 is the other part. Once combined, I think we're going to have one of the best ARPGs on the market by far, and I hope more people pick it up at that point. That doesn't take away though from the fact that Season 8 standing on its own has been very fun. I'm happy I got to play it with so many cool people and launch a Blood Pact with as much fun success for those involved. And I look forward to more of this in the future in Season 9. Stay tuned for more content involving Season 9. As we get more information, I'll make some videos as it drops, reacting to it and talking about it live on my stream. Also, buff Anubis soul gem drop rates, please. Save my friends' souls and sanity. Anyways, I'm Sleepy Cat and I'm tired. Good night.